Welcome to Tap Into an Expert, the podcast where we sit down with industry leaders to explore the questions that matter most in today's rapidly evolving business landscape. I'm your host, Eric Sheinkop, CEO and co-founder of the Desire Company. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Chris Perry from Firstmovr, a leading expert in omnichannel marketing and retail media. In addition to be a noted songwriter, often cited as being the next Weird Al Yankovic or Michael Scott of parody songs, Chris has been at the forefront of helping retailers and brands navigate the complexities of modern commerce, with a particular focus on the critical role of measurement in driving success. With previous roles at Reckitt and Kellogg's, Chris has trained over 35,000 people since starting Firstmovr. That's a lot of people to train, so I'm excited to dive into that. And in this episode, we're going to get into how companies can bridge the gap between omnichannel ambition and actual performance. We're going to explore how the right metrics can drive real change, focusing on how education, accountability, and strategic measurement are key in thriving in today's landscape. So let's get started. First of all, Chris, how do you train 35,000 people since starting your company, Firstmovr?
That's a great question. And honestly, we're not always the best at tooting our own horns because we just do the work. And then over time, people are like, oh, wow, this has really added up. But Firstmovr is about 5 years old. Again, we specialize in omni-channel education, upskilling, and change management. So we do events, trainings, workshops, immersion certifications, and actually do consulting and do the work, having been practitioners ourselves and have people on our team who have actually been on the CPG side in the trenches. But really, we work now with over 110 different CPGs globally and locally, training their teams live and or through on-demand certification programs, right, fitting whatever model of kind of L&D or learning and development that they've got internally. And as we started adding up all the numbers of the people that we've been reaching across the industry, it became quite large. And this was not even including I think it's over like 10,000 people that come to our free virtual events that we put on every month as well. So, I mean, arguably we're getting upwards of 50,000, but we're very proud of that. Obviously, we have to keep earning the privilege of training everybody, but we really want to democratize great insights and actions in the space on all topics: marketing, digital shelf, omni-channel partnerships, profitability, you name it. And we're really excited that we've been able to make that progress in now 5 years. I mean, in e-commerce years, 5 years is 100. So I always like to say I'm looking pretty good for 100 years old. But yeah, looking forward to the next 35,000.
Sure. I mean, and that's amazing. And it's just testament to what we're going to talk about today, the importance of upskilling and training and the evolution and education that consistently needs to happen within these companies to really compete on today's global scale. But, many companies, they say they want to be omnichannel. Their metrics and therefore their behaviors haven't caught up though. So we're going to kick off the discussion looking at this hypothesis. We are what we do what we measure. If we want to do omnichannel marketing and then incremental, then we must measure omnichannel marketing and then incremental. InvestPro reports that companies excelling in omnichannel strategy see a 25% boost in revenue and a 15% improvement in customer satisfaction. So Chris, let's unpack it. Why does measurement matter so much now?
I wish I'd made up that hypothesis because I'd probably be a millionaire just from that very catchy phrase. We are what we do what we measure. But in 15 plus years of being in e-commerce and omni and all these kind of modern marketing stages of evolution, and trying to be a first mover. That's why we named it Firstmovr, was whatever the next change is, we want to be there. So it may not always be e-com, it'll be AI commerce and whatever, metaverse commerce, whatever, where we're in the matrix at some point, I'm sure.
Sure.
But we realized I think I've learned more about human psychology than I really have about commerce, because at the end of the day, change is really hard. And we always like to say, then let's change that, right? It doesn't have to be that hard. But as human beings, I would say my wife will always tell you, Chris is not a change agent at home, but at work he is, right? So in every realm of our life, there are places we get into a comfort zone and we don't change or we don't lean into change. But the shopper has changed, right? If we think about ourselves as shoppers, everyone is a sample size of one, and we're all becoming omni-channel, if not fully omni-channel. Right now, again, shoppers don't say I'm omni-channel, right? But they are shopping and putting more and more of their dollars in different buckets and different fulfillment models, different channels and different retailers. They're influenced by different touch points. And so we all are omni-channel shoppers. Organizations, retailers, brands, and everybody in between have to do omni-channel, but we haven't been doing omni-channel outside of the people dedicated to omni-channel, right? The e-com teams, the agencies specializing in this area. Why? Because they're measured on it, right? The only way they can be successful is if they prove some level of performance in the area that they were assigned. But everyone else, right, the 90 to 95% of the organization that was not assigned to that area of change isn't changing because they weren't measured on it. So when we've broken down, like, not to say that the bigger consulting companies don't have a lot of value when they try to lead change management. We've tried to really democratize like a practitioner's view of the 8 factors of change you kind of need to actually be able to almost scorecard a team on or an organization on to drive change. And all 8 have to be in place to actually make any change happen, right? Whether it was shopper marketing or, or digital marketing in the past, social media, let alone advanced to today, to e-commerce, omni. But the underpinning piece was measurement, because at the end of the day, even if you don't know how to do something, if I'm measured on it on very clear KPIs that lead to the outcome that I want, I'm going to have to figure out what I don't know, what processes I don't have, what team members I don't have yet, what structure of the team I need. So not to get ahead of ourselves, but that, like, when people say, what's the one thing I need to remember? Change what you're measured on, right? There was a really great Harvard Business Review article, I think from 2010, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's still correct today. If you want to change what CEOs care about, change what they're measured on. But that needs to cascade all the way through an organization, not just the CEO.
Absolutely. And I love that. I mean, if you think about any other industry, sports is entirely, success is only based on measurement, right?
Oh, exactly.
Catches, pitches, any sport, how fast you're running, how the distance you're running, everything is about specific measurement. But in marketing, we've always had this like 50% of marketing works. We just don't know which 50%.
Right.
And that's always the craziest thing I've heard from CMOs, because it's like, well, why is that? So why do you think now it's starting to matter more? Is there, it seems like precise measurement is becoming more and more critical. Do you have a hypothesis on why that is today?
Well, I think to be fair, for a long time, when I started in e-commerce in 2010, I thought it was going to explode and it was going to be the future of commerce. And when I say I was right, ultimately, that wasn't I was right. I mean, anyone in the space was right. It was going to ultimately be, and has started out as the #1 driver of growth and continue to be, but it was still a small share of the business. So for a long time, it still was small, was good, but it wasn't meaningful enough to change everything that we do. But actually, and I'm going to tangent just one part. One of the reasons a lot of organizations didn't change until COVID was because they are public companies who are not actually measured directly on sales and sales growth and share, but on stock valuation. And stock valuation is a short-term metric. So Wall Street analysts, shareholders, they typically are going to say, what are you doing for me this quarter? And yeah, I know you're investing in the future so that you survive the future, but I just want my returns and my dividend now. I don't really care what you do for the future. I care for what you've delivered to me now. So the problem is boards and C-suites who are directly measured on that stock valuation and those kind of Wall Street metrics have to make short-term decisions, A, for the company, but B, for their own career survival. And that's, everybody's human at the end of the day, right? So they are what they measure, and thus they do what they measure. But then when it cascades down to the organization, as a senior director of sales at Kellogg's, I wasn't measured on stock valuation. I was measured on, did I deliver the sales goal that month? And so they are indirectly tied, but the reality is, for a while you could coast on the old metric approach, and until you couldn't. And so now is kind of this point where we actually have more data and more visibility to data than ever before. Before, it was like a data desert and you had to be a data entrepreneur, but now we actually have a lot of that omni data. And it's, even if sometimes it's a little bit directional because we're still piecing silos together. And the issue is that, I think there's a great quote, you can't manage what you what you can't measure.
Measure, sure.
That's Peter Drucker said that, and it's a great quote. But I changed it to you can't manage what you don't measure, because now we can measure it. You just don't or won't. And so I think the reality, though, is, as you called out, companies that don't do this are failing in front of the companies that do this. So it's becoming very clear in changes of leadership and what other, senior leadership is being held accountable to. You got to change the way you measure, because you're not getting the outputs that you want. So thus, but they still don't necessarily know what to do. So that's why companies like Firstmovr and others are here to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point of companies can now measure. So it's not what you can't measure, it's what you don't measure. I still work with a lot of huge corporations that have a hard time measuring, it seems, and getting back, and it's very delayed. Is the integration AI, machine learning, is that influencing how companies are approaching omnichannel measurements? I mean, is it providing new opportunities, challenges? Is that why you're seeing more?
I mean, there's a lot of hype around AI in general,
Sure.
and it's a lot of like, it's going to change the world, and it is, but not like overnight, but it will, yes, change the world. But I think the promise of what AI can do in bringing disparate pieces of information together, and not only analyze it, right, and describe what's happening, but also arguably then also provide some level of insight to what should you do next, predict what would come next if you scenario planning. That all is starting to become possible. Now, not all organizations have figured out how to scale this yet in a way that's like data safe, right? Because again, the goal for any major CPG is not that their employees start plugging, their P&L numbers into Chat GPT, right? Because it needs to be a private, safe server where the data is building off of what we're allowed to share. But there is a promise of this. I think part of it, though, is, and this is going to sound a little, and some of these are like brilliant basics, and I don't say this because I had this hindsight earlier, right? I had this hindsight after, when I could see all these companies, but a lot of times we don't actually know what we're trying to achieve. So sales and share growth and profit growth are, and I know we're gonna talk a little bit about this, but they're outputs, right? They are the result of doing something very intentional to grow, right? Growth is not a strategy, it's the result of a strategy. So when I only measure on the output, I don't know why I am or am not getting the output that I intended to get. So it's part of this is there are data inputs out there. There are data sources. It's almost like they don't have like the customer lifetime value structure to organize the input metrics or the leading metrics and the lagging metrics. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but that's a really important part, because otherwise you just kind of keep going back to your default, like, my sales aren't up. Why?
Right.
I thought we had this great initiative. And you're like, well, you did, but you didn't identify the leading like metrics and the data required that would lead to that output that you wanted. But a lot of brands don't even actually have like a clear objective, right? Objectives, even in a media brief, are 4 parts. What is my actual growth objective? What's my behavioral objective, i.e. who am I trying to achieve that with, and what do I need them to change their behavior to do? Then it would be, how do I talk to that person or that group, that audience? And then what media tactics would help me do all of that? And how would I measure that, right? So it sounds so simple, but I mean, there's so many, just even if we look at marketing, there's so many marketing initiatives that don't really have a clear objective. So how do I know I was successful? Really, even if I saw sales growth, I don't really know why it was successful. Like you said, the 50%, I don't know which one worked, right?
Yeah.
And so this sounds so theoretical, but it's not. This is the mindset that needs to be broken. We can make this not so difficult that no one can do it, but we can add a little more science to it.
I think that that's so important, is jumping on the science and what's available to us to increase our measurement and our goals. So, do you have any examples? I mean, what are some of the innovative companies that you're seeing out there that are successfully leveraging their omnichannel measurement? And what do you think other organizations can learn from those approaches that you're seeing?
We work with a ton of companies. Obviously, we would never give away their secrets, so
Sure.
to speak, but things that you can kind of see, some public facing examples of things that we can see. Some of the companies I either admire or that we've worked directly with, L'Oreal, Mondelez, Procter and Gamble, some of the big companies. I mean, there's also a lot of challenger companies that do this really well because they aren't inhibited by the old way of doing things. They only have omni-channel or e-commerce as their route to market. So they have to hack that until they get it right. But the big companies, knowing that they're often the ones that face the biggest barrier to change, because they aren't naturally change agents. What we see and is when they think about measurement, they've really organized around this kind of input and output approach. And then they've been very intentional about the type of growth they want. So the example I always give with like Procter and Gamble, and I'm giving them credit. I imagine that the thought was already put in there, and they're very good at like category management and thinking about how do I drive incremental growth, not just blind growth, but very specific growth. If you look at like laundry detergent as an example, I always use this example. Every single product in their portfolio does a different thing, almost maniacally. It's like it's genius. It's not just I want to grow Tide. It's like each Tide product does something different. Tide liquid laundry detergent is to convert you in. Tide Pods is to trade you up from liquid because it's a little bit better and more convenient. Tide Power Pods is a little bit better than just pods, and that trades you up again. And when you get to Power Pods right now, there's nothing better, quote unquote, than Power Pods yet. So then they're like, you know what? You don't just want laundry detergent. You want our dryer sheets from Bounce. You want our Downy Unstoppables. You want the full regimen for the perfect laundry experience, right? So every single SKU even has its own like incrementality decision tree, which gets that science. So then then arguably if they're like, hey, we're not trading up enough people, plus up the activity around the trade up experience, or hey, we're not cross-selling enough people to get that kind of incrementality, plus up that activity. So L'Oreal does that really well. Mondelez, even with snacks, really designs every lever of their business around incremental, expandable consumption, like new occasions, movie night packs, birthday, like they do some really cool things locally and globally that show very intentional types of growth, right? So it's like, I'm going to grow because I expanded movie night as an occasion that's being under leveraged right now in the industry. And then if they're not successful, they know why, because I clearly didn't successfully grow that experience, but I can either optimize or pivot to something new, as opposed to, hey, I'm not growing, I don't know why, right? And so let me just throw another, broadcast spray and pray thing out there and hope it works. So I think there's some big companies that have really applied like a micro challenger brand measurement model. And then the challenger brands often, even though they're smaller, they actually have to go to market like this. So they actually naturally do this. And then that's why they get acquired by the big companies, because they were able to hack growth in a more intentional way.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, as we know, every single day, the world, technology, consumer behavior is constantly evolving. So going into segment 2, upskilling for a change and education as a growth lever, which I absolutely love your focus on, because continuous education it's no longer a luxury. I mean, it's truly a necessity. And I take classes in AI on the weekends. It used to be somewhat of a luxury where I would send over learning opportunities to our head of production around AI and say, you should look into this, and didn't put much pressure on it. And now it's not up for discussion. We have to dive in. Noted by Trading Magazine, businesses that put resources into thorough training programs can experience a 24% surge in their profit margin. So what does effective omni-channel upskilling truly look like for you guys, and what do you think it's going to be looking like moving forward for the industry as at large?
So it's funny, there are a couple immediate responses to that, because it's a really good question. So I've been a senior leader and a practitioner in CPG in this space, on the sales and the marketing and the brands. I mean, I've been across all these different areas, and I have been in a lot of different trainings before. I've gone to conferences, I've gone to summits, I've been online, I've been in person. And again, I want to say, I always being an upskiller and an event leader, I have a lot of respect and admiration for those who do this, because there's a lot. It's really like a Wizard of Oz role, but you don't get the title of Wizard of Oz. You're putting this on, and you come in and you almost have to put on a circus and then you disappear. But the challenge is kind of twofold. A lot of the bar has been so low in training and upskilling and even event education that I don't know that the audience even knows. Like it's almost kind of like in 2007 when everybody was listening to Steve Jobs talk about the 3 new innovations that they were going to launch. And then he said, oh, fool you, it's just one thing. It's the iPhone. Like they don't even, your mind is exploding because you can't possibly have fathomed that there could be a device that would do all 3 things. So it's almost like we don't seek better because we don't know better is possible. So I have sat in several trainings and or in panels or at events where I thought I could have possibly taken Ambien and learned just as much, taking a quick nap. And or again, or it's like I almost eye rolled the topic. Like, the topic just sounds boring, right? Even if it's important, right? So there's just so many low bars. And this isn't to question the people's credibility that lead these, right? Usually they have a lot of substance. It's the format, it's the structure, it's the interactivity, it's the theme, it's the show personship, if you will, that's not quite there. A lot of fireside chats and things like that, panels often. The moment someone sits down on stage, you lose at least 20% of the energy. I mean, it could literally, it could be Santa Claus, it could be Jesus, it could be, it could be Trump, it could be anybody with energy, and they just lose a little energy when they sit down. It doesn't matter who it is. So and obviously if you don't cater to visual and audio and there's a lot of components that go into making upskilling good, but it's also about making it relevant and personalized to an audience. So we felt like upskilling was kind of like the e-commerce of e-commerce, right? E-commerce, when I first started, was always at first it was like, what is e-commerce? Like nobody even knew what we were or what we were doing. Then when they figured out that there was a function that did that, then it was like, well, we should probably talk about it. But it was always at the end of a meeting. They never had time for us. No one followed up because no one knew anything about it. Like we were unfortunately, like the stepchild of the team. And so like education has kind of always been underappreciated because like, oh, I can't allocate my team. They're too busy. And you're like, but yeah, but they're too busy being inefficient. Like, what if they spent a little bit of time being uber efficient and they were allowed to be uber efficient or uber curious to become efficient, and then they can come back and just kick royal rump every day of the week. And so I totally get that there's a lot of learning requirements on teams. And obviously if you spend all your time learning, then you have no time to do the job. But I feel like people went back to, part of this is people defaulted back to like, well, then we go back to the other extreme. You don't really have any training. Or part of it is that we're not even measuring people on getting training and enabling them to. So we really feel like, kind of to get to your point though, upskilling, we find actually is very valuable when there's kind of like an inside look and feel. So we do a lot of customized trainings, right? So it's their categories, their branding, their retailers, their markets, their functions, right? Really, this isn't off the shelf stuff. I mean, we have off the shelf thinking, but it's very customized, but yet it's an outside voice partnering with the inside voices. Because as I'm sure you know, Eric, once I've heard you say something, if I work at your company, and then you say it again, I'm like, yeah, Eric always says that. Right. Even though, Eric, you were right. You were always right. I stopped listening because of familiarity bias, right? So if suddenly Chris comes in and says the same thing Eric says, I'm going to come back up to Eric and go, did you hear what Chris said? This thing is important. And you're like, I know. I've been saying that since I quit my job. So, but it's also making it interactive. It's really making it practitioner focused. And we really try to bring the right pedagogy, right, to the whole how to structure content so that people really can see like, okay, even Brilliant Basics, right? You know the physical shelf. This is how it works. This is the digital shelf. This is how it works, but this is how it's different. And this is why it matters to the physical shelf, right? There's always very much, it sounds very formulaic, but it's what are we talking about? Why does it matter? So what does that mean for you? Now, what do you need to go do about it? Every single thing we do is, and I kid you not, people are like, I know what to go do now because I care about the thing that we were talking about. And that's the feedback we get. So it's not to make it so simple, but I just think people weren't trained in training. I actually took, my mom was a teacher. My wife is a teacher. Like I almost thought I was going to be a French teacher at one point because I was minoring in French, and then I thought I'd do education, but then I took a marketing class, and then that was the end of that. I went to marketing, but ultimately I found that there was just this missing passion for the transfer of knowledge to someone else. And I really felt like I did that my whole career, but then in 2020, when everyone started going, oh my gosh, we need to figure out how to do this, and we don't know how, we saw an opportunity to actually help do that and democratize it.
Yeah, no, and I love that. It's so important, but it seems like education and training has always been like an afterthought.
Right.
So to your point, it wasn't the right environment, it wasn't the right energy. I think that it was probably an afterthought because it's really hard to measure, speaking of which. So how do you measure the impact of upskilling initiatives on key business metrics, customer lifetime value, return on marketing investment, like where does that come in that people could see I invested in upskilling, I invested in uptraining, and these are the results that I'm able to actually measure?
Not every company that we've worked with wanted or had or depends on like how robust the training was going to be. If it's just like a keynote or something, it's a little less measured than it is if it's a certification program. But there
Sure.
are some, I would say, quantitative and qualitative things that we always try to implement in any program, which gives you some initial start, right? So obviously it would be, you know, as simple as like how many people took the program, right? What percent of your total audience took the training and completed it, right? But completion is kind of like, it's even like on the digital shelf. Complete content doesn't mean it's compelling content, right? So just because I learned it doesn't mean I'm applying it, right? So we often like to do like a pre-assessment and then a post-assessment, right? So it's kind of like, so then you would know, hey, on average, people scored about 60% on the quiz or the test before the training, and now they got a 95 after. So obviously then we can start training then we can start measuring the retention of the knowledge. Then there's also obviously we always try to do like net promoter score. How relevant was this to your day job? I mean, these are self, claimed feelings, but that's important because how you feel about this also impacts whether and we do it on every single session, right? So if we've done 18 to 24 live course, like mini MBAs for organizations where their team took like 9 months to go through it, and those companies actually started doing really well in the market, which is another way to measure this. But ultimately we were able to like capture like every individual training's feeling so that we could actually optimize the training in real time, so that we were always removing stuff that they didn't like, adding stuff that they did, so that it just kept, it really got personalized all the way through. But the most important way is it's twofold, right? It's one, if you're training on a very specific topic, there are ways to then measure how did the training or the program impact that specific strategy, right? So if we're training on digital shelf and improving your digital shelf and your storytelling and your content and your visibility, there can be a little bit of where was using digital shelf analytics tools or manual audits, where were you before we did the training, after the training, 6 months later, where were we? You can also assign like actual like homework from it. Like, hey, part of your homework from this is to submit a page that you've optimized 2 months from now or 3 months from now, giving you enough time to go do it. And then obviously by default, because you optimize the leading inputs, you got the lagging output. So, but we also, like, we've done a couple programs with really large CPGs that were like meaningful, meaty programs that sent like 1,000+ people through. And a lot of their companies started to succeed in ways that were actually noted in the news. And when it was actually, some of it's always hard to like pull back, was it what you learned? But it was really cool. Actually, a couple big companies actually reached out to us and said, our retailers are now want to partner with us because we get Omni better than they know Omni. And they're calling us and giving us captaincy roles. And so while our CEO just recently called out the positive results and the growth, and he's not calling this as the driver, this is the only reason that we were given the opportunities to grow, because we were now fluent in the language of Omni and digital in a way that we weren't before. So we really try to follow some of the big companies and see as granularly or as holistically how much it's impacted. And we're seeing that. So again, it is hard to measure, but there are ways to measure the flow through a program, the outputs after. If you get more granular to the topic, you can see, hey, I trained you on profitability. How has our profitability changed since, right?
Sure.
What needs to be a follow-up to the training to make that happen? So there are ways there's an art and a science to training that can be applied, but it's partly like laying out, what am I trying to achieve? How am I going to measure it? Is this program looking like it should achieve it? And then how am I going to know that it's consistently building over time?
You mentioned knowledge sharing between groups, between people, and hearing it from the same person over and over is not effective. Hearing it, from multiple people within your organization, it starts to actually matter. How do you guys foster and encourage that knowledge sharing between specifically retail media and the broader marketing teams? Because they do seem uh, pretty separate in most of the new retail media networks, that they're not as connected. So how do you encourage that collaboration and knowledge sharing?
From just a design of a training or whatnot, we always try again, if it's a keynote and you're the only speaker, that's different. But when we're
Yeah,
doing bigger workshops or full day summits or whatever we may do with different companies, we always try to like be a red thread trainer in the sense that we bring in other voices, right? So whether it be internal voices, we also always try to like, how do we get stakeholders that are arguably on the side we're trying to convince to be on the voice of the change management, right? So, to your point, if it's an internal discussion and you're like, hey, we got somebody on the media team who's normally the group we're trying to convince they need to change, we got the one change agent on that team. Let's get them to speak so that now the team is hearing it from one of their own and they're like, it's a converted, right, person, right, that's already fully bought in. We also obviously try to bring in, whether it's the retail media network folks, if we can, agency partners, again, the retailer, if they're willing to. Sometimes while it's not ideal, if the retailer can't be there in person, I mean, even just getting a video of them saying
sure.
something is kind of important. It's so silly. I even go back to my early days in brand management and sales. Like, if you brought a retailer in a negotiation, a couple videos of shoppers saying something, like it might be 2 or 3 shoppers that you got to sign that they would do a little interview with you at a Walmart or at a Target or a Kroger or whatever. Like, you wouldn't believe, like, a sample size of 3 could change your entire partnership positively, because somebody like, oh, see, you've been saying this insight and I didn't believe you because I couldn't imagine that you were channeling your inner shopper. But when you had just 3 random people, which I could have cut out 10 people that said the opposite and just shown you my 3 that supported my point, but suddenly you're listening differently, right? So we try to do that as much as we can. I think some of this is also, it's a little bit, again, being an outside voice that isn't just saying, here's some cool information, hope you like it, but actually kind of assigning you a task, right? Because there is always it's a very important, a lot of training and presentations don't have a now what. It was kind of like,
Sure.
it was just a so what at best, right? So there's some implications, good luck, if you care, but the now what is like, hey guys, if you in marketing aren't talking to this team, you all could fail very, very quickly, right? And again, you're not disrespecting them. You're not saying you're not good at what you do. You're not saying, you said there are a lot of brands. I mean, sometimes you're even you're not making it up, but you're saying there are a lot of brands out there that are going to fail because they don't do this. I don't want you to be one of them. I imagine you don't want to be one of them either, right? Well, nobody wants to be the thing that you're saying is not good, even if you're not calling them not good. So there are some consultants out there that will quickly come in and just say, you guys stink at everything that you do. I'm very much I'm more of the positive sandwich approach, right? Like, where, it's like positive, negative, positive, or positive, constructive, positive, but it's more of a empowerment positive, right? It's like, hey,
Sure.
you're probably not doing this because you're not doing this very clear action. You can solve that, right? And obviously we work with the people that are leading the program too, to know, kind of, now that they've heard this message, you should set up these connections or have these follow-up meetings. So that's kind of part of the change management work too that we do. It's not just we're an in and out presenter. We're a partner all the way through, trying to help you lead that change all the way to fruition.
Yeah. No, and I love that. And that brings us to segment 3, which is the ownership through metrics. And ownership has been, culture of ownership. That's been something that's been talked about for a long time. And I feel that the word that's been missing the most from a culture of ownership is accountability. And it really is a word that it strikes fear into the heart of marketers. It's very easy, going back to what we said earlier, 50% of marketing works. I just don't know which 50%. Call it a day and keep doing what you're doing. Try a couple of new things. But accountability is the most critical aspect of anything that somebody in an organization, whether it's marketing, whether it's retail media, anywhere, and especially in the age of omnichannel, more critical than ever to ensure right people are responsible for the right metrics. And Gallup indicates only 50% of employees fully understand what's expected of them in their roles. And I fully buy into that. I have this discussion all the time where it's like, well, I thought this person was in charge of this project and owned this and they knew their KPIs. Yeah, KPIs are one thing, but accountability on a more granular level is something that we often forget as leaders to communicate well. So, Chris, what are you seeing? How can companies redesign accountability to drive better omni-channel performance?
It's a big one. And when we think of like the 8 factors of change, right? I mean, we have a whole ebook, a free ebook that's out there on how to, like, again, it's really a scorecard at just high level qualitatively say, do I have all these things, right? Do I have executive commitment around the change? Do I have dedicated leadership to the change, at least in the short term, before it becomes everyone's accountability, right? Because if you're the first person assigned to AI, in the organization, there's not a whole team on it. It's you, right?
Yeah.
You're the leader of change. And eventually, though, AI is going to impact everybody, but somebody has to start being the AI czar, for lack of better words, or the change czar in the short term to build a case for why it should be a bigger function across, obviously a multi-person, if not cross-organizational implementation. So you need focused leadership, dedicated leadership. Obviously, you have to have a vision of what the world would look like if we achieved the goals. You have to actually have SMART goals. SMART being not that we're not smart, but the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. You have to have communication and assessment regularly to know how I'm doing. It's not just, hey, Eric, I assigned you those 3 initiatives and those KPIs at the beginning of the year, and then I never talked to you about them again, right? Part of accountability is you talk to me about them frequently and we reassess them, right? Hey, you know what? That second initiative, we're not even going to be able to do that this year. So I'm not going to ding you for that. I'm going to give you a new number 2 or I'm going to move number 3 to number 2 and give you a new number 3, because otherwise, I know I've gotten to the end of the year and like, oh my gosh, I forgot that I had that one on there. No one ever asked me about that. And it didn't matter, it seems, because no one cared, right? So, but also resources and investment. Obviously, there has to be some fuel behind that. But then the last 2 are this education piece, which we've talked about, but accountability, or what I call organizational enablement. So we have this really nice 1-pager, and I always have to put things into like simplify things. So we kind of have like a crawl, walk, run, sprint, soar in a perfect world of accountability, right? For internal and external at a CPG versus vis-a-vis a retailer. And there's a lot under each one of them, but the idea is crawl is essentially, I am aware, right? I'm aware of the change that's happening. I might even care about it, but I'm still at crawl if I haven't moved to walk, where I'm actually going to make it something we talk about, right? So I've heard it talked about, but I'm not talking about it. To get to walk, I've got to put it on my agenda. It's got to be on the agenda so that we talk about it. Not at the end of the agenda, because you'll never get to that I would say, as number 2 or number 3 thing that you talk about. Now, to be fair, omnichannel is a great example. Omnichannel is all commerce. So I don't know why it has to be a separate thing on the agenda, but when it's still separate in people's minds, it needs to be, again, just like assigning a person like you, if you were the AI czar in your company, for a time, AI is just you. And then you're going to be allowed to come in and talk about it on the agenda. But eventually, AI will impact most of our day-to-day processes and measurement and operations. So it'll be just part of everything that we talked about. So the E in e-commerce historically hasn't been silent until it becomes silent, but you have to start with something, right? So crawl is awareness, walk is it's on the agenda, run is that we measure it for the group, right? So that if I'm going to talk about it, at some point I can't go, hey, Eric, we've been talking about it for a while. Are we even doing it? Are we doing it well? Like suddenly we're going to have to say, well, hey, we were doing omni-channel marketing, or we did digital shelf, or we created an omni-channel joint business plan with Walmart or Amazon or whatever it is. Here's how it looks. How does that stack up, right? How much better was it than before, right? And that's going to cause us to need to get outside benchmarks, partners, tools, better scorecards, better processes. But that's just group accountability. Where you get to what I'd say is run and, or sprint and soar ultimately, where we're running faster to the point we fly, is when it becomes an individual's measurement. That's why having the right metrics, inputs and outputs, becomes really important. And then ultimately, where we get to soar, I like to say, just because I'm measured on it doesn't mean it necessarily impacts whether I get my bonus or whether I get promoted. When it actually changes the trajectory of my career, that's where it's soar, right? Where I've truly become accountable because I'm going to do it because that sounds selfish, but it's going to benefit me, because we all have to worry about ourselves too. So I really almost think you brought up something interesting, but the RACI model that we're all very familiar with, the responsible, accountable, contributing, involved, I almost want to make it RACIA or something and put aware right at the end, because most people sit in aware. Like, I know this is happening, but I'm not even involved. And I'm not even going to try to get involved because I don't have to get involved, or I'm only going to get involved when there's a problem and I can blame someone for it, right? And nobody's saying that, nobody's doing that with bad intention. It just kind of happens naturally as we're humans. But the word accountable is scary. But what's funny is accountable is actually humbly one level better, in my opinion, than responsible, because responsible is I have to go do it, right?
Mm,
Accountable is just I need to be I might need to be very involved in it, but I'm accountable, right? If I'm in sales, I don't do the graphic design for the digital shelf. I don't make the video content. I don't run the media campaigns necessarily. Some companies have them do that, but I am accountable for the sales and share they either did or didn't drive, and the positive or negative that my doing or lack of doing had on my retailer. So wouldn't I want to be accountable to that? So I was involved so I can say, hey guys, why are we even doing this? This isn't even going to drive our sales. And that's why I'm not hitting my goal. So the cool thing is, in a way, you're still 1 degree away from the grunt work, but you need to know how, you need to be dangerous enough to like be able to audit something, know what questions
sure.
to ask, know who to bring in. So accountability shouldn't actually be as scary as it sounds, because I'm not saying, oh no, I have to be the graphic designer on the digital shelf. I'm going to have to go to school for that and learn how to use Photoshop. You don't have to do that. You just have to be able to say, I'm looking at my page. I'm thinking through this. I'm looking at other competitors and leaders. I've observed these things. Hey, digital shelf team or graphic design team or whoever does the work, have we ever thought about doing this? Because I thought this could help us, right, achieve our goals. Or, hey, what are our goals so that we can align? Those questions actually make you smarter. They teach you things. They force you to learn. And everybody, again, I always use this in trainings, but my last kind of analogy I use is, you don't need to be the cook in the kitchen to help the cook. The cook doesn't really
Sure.
want you in the kitchen. They want you to help manage the restaurant. So serve the tables, bring back that there's too much spice in the soup, host at the front, make sure people get seated, clean up afterwards, bust the tables, right? If they need someone to like turn off the oven, that's fine, right? But ask the cook how can I best help you? And then actually do that, and that will drive that accountability.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, I think for anybody to be successful in an organization, they have to understand what they contribute to the overall and how that impacts the overall success of the organization. So that's all about understanding what they're accountable for, what they're responsible for, um, and how to measure that, most importantly. So how can leaders effectively communicate that importance of accountability measurement to the teams, making sure that everybody understands how their work contributes to the overall success? Do you have any examples of companies that have successfully transformed their organizational structures from a high level of like, here's your KPIs, here's what we need to get done for the year, to much more granular accountability and processes to align with the demands of omnichannel marketing?
There are quite a few companies. I think a lot of the CPGs are in progress of doing this, because again, a lot of them, the big ones, have hundreds to thousands of people, and and again, unfortunately, there are egos in there and people's careers at stake, and there's a lot more than just, let me just change around the structure and hope it works okay. And what people are assigned. But one that pops into my, well, two examples, but that I see as a global trend. And I'm not going to say that these retailers have done this perfectly, right? Because they're also a group of human beings as well, really defining the playbook. But Target in 2018 did something rather crazy. They merged their online merchant retail buying team with their in-store buying team to become enterprise merchants. That was arguably blasphemy, because it had always been this separate thing, right? Unless you were Amazon, which was only online, and you were in-store retailers who were only in-store, you had this separate multi-channel approach, and not omni, right, of having an e-com team and an in-store team. And that sounded good, except people don't shop one or the other, they shop both. And if and this was actually one of the issues too. Walmart followed suit and did that same thing in 2020. But if you think of Walmart's trajectory, when they got into e-commerce in the early 2010s in a meaningful way, then they got really into e-com with the purchase of Jet.com, rest in peace.
Mhm.
All these different players that they acquired and merged. There were literally headlines where they were choosing to keep e-com and in-store separate. And
Yeah.
that seemed to make sense, except the shop where they were going out wasn't separate. And so the problem was, online was growing at the at the detriment of in-store, but the in-store team was being measured on their loss and dinged for it when the online team was just picking up the channel shifting that was going to happen anyway, on top of what they intentionally tried to drive. So the problem was, and I'm not picking on Walmart, right? All retailers are under the same pressure. Walmart wasn't looking at where is my growth really coming from. It's been coming from online for a long time, becoming a bigger and bigger share. Where you how do I make sure everyone is serving each other, right? The in-store is still important, but it is not where the growth is. It's where the base is, right? So how do we partner that together? Well, that simple but not so simple merge of those teams allowed everyone to then, now the buyers are still focused on key processes, resetting the shelf, choosing the right assortment, enabling growth, but they can actually say, well, who's driving, where is the growth coming from? Oh, online. Who is actually the horse pulling that chariot across the sky? Oh, these brands, which aren't my normal partners. I'm going to prioritize those brands because they're helping me grow incrementally overall. And so we actually see like Target and Walmart prioritizing brands that know how to perform digitally, new brands, challenger brands that started online only and have become easy builds onto their business. And even Target has been asking some major CPGs to test innovation online first, so to prove that it should earn its way in store. Because again, the finite shelf ideally is a proven experience, right? Costco and Sam's Club and BJ's only want proven grocery, mass, and drug products. Why wouldn't the in-store experience be the same way? I want things I know are going to sell, but to win online first, I have to approach it differently than just selling in and getting in store and doing my normal go-to-market strategy in store. So we really do have an omni first to earn in-store later approach taking place, and retailers that have merged that way are now expecting brands to merge that way. So there are a number of brands. I named a couple, L'Oreal, Mondelez, I think are two that wreck it, and not because of me. But years after I was there, they've done even better. But who really did? They've already gone through a lot of the various evolutionary changes of structuring their teams, actually using those 8-part frameworks. They've actually progressed all the way to a more e-commercialized or omni-channelized model. Very similar to challenger brands who just had to do that from the beginning. But I don't say it's perfect, but they've got the right teams in place. People are empowered. They're being trained. They're being measured on input metrics, leading metrics specifically. And I think they're going to be, but everyone's going to be pushed this way because big retailers are going to say, hey, you're not omni-channel, and I am. So when
Yeah.
you are, come back and talk to me. Until then, I don't want to talk to 2 different teams. I want to talk to one team, right? I want to talk to one unified team at your organization who knows how to win in both places, but also knows how to think omni first, because that's how we have to operate too.
Sure, sure. And you just mentioned it, how do you go from that lagging to leading? That's the biggest question. I mean, to me, this is like I mentioned athletes earlier being measured on everything. The difference between a high school athlete who gets on a scale at home, that's lagging information. That's what
Right.
did they did, and they're looking back at how it affected things. What a professional athlete does when they get on a scale, it tells them their body mass and their fat, their body fat, their muscle weight, what they need to do, and it gives them, okay, this is what this means for the future. Here's what it means for what I need to do this week, and that's starting to happen. This quest for omnichannel success. It is easy to get caught up in measuring the wrong things, and too often, I mean, definitely what we've been seeing from a frustrating aspect in my company is we get a lot of lagging data, a
Right.
lot of lagging metrics. It tells you what happened in the past rather than what's
Yeah, it's
likely to
descriptive,
happen.
right? It's not
Exactly.
diagnostic or prescriptive or predictive. It's just there's a whole progression of data, and it's just descriptive is a start, but it's not helpful if it doesn't tell me what to go do next.
Absolutely. So how do you make that shift? How do brands, I mean, Gartner's research says 30% of marketers, marketing metrics have only 30% of marketing metrics have a direct tie to business outcomes. So the other is, I don't want to say it's wasted, but it's not as important. How do you start shifting that internally at a company so that they don't have to just rely on, okay, here's what happened last quarter, here's what happened first half of the year, here's what happened last year. How do you get ahead of it and start going to leading metrics?
No, it's a great question. So now there's a theory around customer lifetime value and in the equation, right? And it's been a theory because most people historically didn't, entities didn't have all of that data to work with, right? Retailers would have had they would have been the best candidate in our CPG environment, our consumer goods, industry. They would have been the best candidate to have that because the customer lifetime value equation is sales, and then the growth of that and the share growth from that is a function of traffic times conversion, which is the normal shopper model, right? But it's more than just traffic times conversion once, it's times basket value or order value, right? So how much should I get in that conversion times repeat rate, obviously, because I want them to buy more often if it's a repeatable product. And then the finance team should always appreciate that we should put profitability in there too, because just because I get top line growth doesn't mean I'm actually making bottom line growth, right? I could be selling a lot of cheap products that don't offset the cost to ship to people or whatever, and now I'm not making enough money. So it's those 5 factors that lead to sales, and then share is sales in the context of a category that I'm measuring. So to your point, when I was in sales, my performance review had my gross shipment number, my gross revenue number internally, not even actually my POS sales, my consumer sales. So so this is an important nuance. What the consumer buys should pull shipments from us to a retailer to sell more, right? But that's not always at the same time. So I'm sure anyone listening out there has been in this position before. I won't blame you if you did it, but there's always a potential. If my fiscal year ends on December, at the end of December, what am I trying to do at the end of the year? I'm trying to load as much stuff up to my retailer as I can to hit my goal. That doesn't mean the consumer bought it. That just means my retailer bought it and it's sitting in their warehouse, right? I hope it sells, but I'll worry about that in January, right? But I got my goal. But see, right there, that's arguably the wrong metric, right? Is
Right.
I'm trying to push something that will make me look good, but I'm not actually incented on the thing that'll pull it through, right? If I did a better job selling to consumers, my retailer is going to need more product from me and they're going to buy more. So there was a cool example. I want to say it was cool, like the outcome was bad at the time, but I think if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, like Domino's, when it first launched, 30-minute delivery, right? That was an amazing feat. But the problem was if the delivery person was measured on getting it within 30 minutes or it's free, there were several instances in the news of very reckless driving to make that happen, right? Because
Yeah.
people were speeding so that they didn't have to eat that money out of their own pay, right? They were going to lose their tip and all this stuff. So the problem was sometimes you need more than one metric, right? It can't just be, I want you to drive sales and you got to get it as fast as 30 minutes, right? You don't want 50 metrics, but arguably it would have had to be to some degree, and they didn't have the technology when they first launched this to track your speed, but it would have been arguably, you have to go the speed limit first, right? That's rule number 1.
Right.
But then we're trying to get it in 30 minutes. So assuming that we went the speed limit and then we could get it to in 30 minutes, you pay full price. If it was going to take us a different, they would have been, unfortunately, that would have meant that they couldn't be that slick with that call to action. It would have had to change a little bit, but that was the issue, right? We were measured on the wrong thing. I think in iRobot with Will Smith, right? Those robots, had 3 laws that they had to follow, and obviously one of them was that they couldn't hurt a human being. So, there has to be something that, the first golden rule that nothing can break
Right.
before you get measured on something that could make you cheat the system to seemingly get the outcome that you want that benefits you. So, part of this is thinking about that customer lifetime value equation. Yes, I'm accountable to, so maybe that's the thing. I'm not responsible for sales. I'm accountable to sales.
Mhm.
But sales team specifically, who normally is responsible for sales, you're no longer responsible, you're accountable. What you are responsible for are the levers you can pull and the metrics you can pull under traffic, conversion, order value, repeat rate. And for a sales team, it might be different than a marketing team, right? The marketing team might be about content quality or effectiveness, right? Whereas the sales team is the content present, because they're not the one designing it. They're the one in auditing that it's there, right? That they're making sure that we are present, we are accurate, we are complete, we meet the retailer's requirements. But they can still bring insight back to the team to make it more effective, but they're not actually measured on effectiveness. They're measured on activation, right? So same thing, traffic is going to be driven by the media team or the shopper marketing team. And certain metrics, do we know what audience, what percent target audience reach did we achieve? What frequency did we reach? Did we get them 3 to 5 times or up to 7 times, depending, to make sure that we really were retained in as a share of their mind, right? Every one of those things can start being, I don't want to make it sound so simple, but I think organizations overthought it, that they don't even make it the medium complexity that it really is. It's not simple, but it's not PhD level either. Like we can do this, lay that out. What actions would drive new people, bigger baskets, trips, and just generally profitability? What metrics are most important? There's some common ones. What actions influence that, and which cross-functional teams do which one? And then yes, there still has to be meetings and scorecards and discussions and processes, but it becomes a lot easier because you can say, hey, but you wanted me to drive baskets, but that's right now that's conflicting with this other goal, right? Which one is more important right now? Then the leader can come in and say, you're right, let's do baskets, so deprioritize this. Then they can make hard decisions that actually don't conflict with one another. Then we can get everyone aligned to one set of marching orders.
Right. I mean, and that's all based on not having that information and the data and the metrics siloed.
Right.
To your point about Domino's, the only people that had that information were the drivers, right? Like they were the ones who knew if they were blowing stop signs or red lights
We're
or
running
speeding,
over the people that might buy their pizza in the future. Right?
exactly.
Exactly.
So you got to communicate it back and understand so that the leadership could understand, okay, there's some other metrics that we need to start measuring you on. Number one, don't break the law.
Right. That's
Number
the first
two,
one.
yeah,
Assuming that is check, then
right,
can you get it to them in 30 minutes? Or can you,
right. So that data sharing is incredibly important to actually be measuring the right things all around, and have an overall holistic idea of what is working and what needs to be adjusted and what else needs to be measured or added into somebody what they're accountable for. But that takes us, next segment 5, next level digital shelf, shopper centric execution. So obviously digital shelf is the new battleground, right, for all brands, and in a very crowded online marketplace, which sounds funny, but it's way more crowded than it is walking into a store. You can't just be present. You need to create compelling, engaging shopper experiences that captures attention, drives conversion. eMarketer's data reveals 70% of consumers begin their product searches on Amazon. Chris, I know when I walk into a store physically, it's for everybody, right?
Right.
When I have a digital shelf experience, I want that to be personalized and for me. So what makes a digital shelf truly a next level experience in what you're seeing today?
No, it's a good question. And honestly, this plays very nicely to leading metrics, because the digital shelf increasingly wasn't something we had data for it till we have in the last really 10 plus years. We've had a lot more data, really to get to the foundational level, because really there's almost a crawl, walk, run framework here too, right? Am I complete, right? Do I have the necessary parts that I'm supposed to have? Am I compliant? Am I legally accurate, right? I don't want to tell people that I cure an illness when I don't really do that, right? Am I accurate for my own brand claims, my own legal requirements, but also am I compliant with what the retailer, right? The retailer doesn't let you do X, but they allow you to do Y. And every retailer is a little different, right? Then there's ultimately consistent, right? Which is, I think those three are kind of the base levels, right? I don't mean everybody does this well, but it's complete. Check, check. I have the list of things I need on a digital shelf to influence online and in-store purchases. I'm correct. I'm compliant. I meet the requirements on all sides. And then I'm consistent. It doesn't have to be the exact same experience at every single retailer, since Target is different than Kroger, is different than Albertsons, is different than, than Amazon. But I might have a very different persona, to your point, that gets me to a more personalized experience. But I need to be consistent. That's where like tools like Salsify and Syndigo and all these, the PIM systems, right? Product information management system, allow us to distribute that content in real time to a lot of retailers, so the shopper sees at least a base experience. But then we get to compelling, right? Which is a little subjective, because you might say, well, what do you mean by compelling? Well, again, it could be the way you design the content. It could be visually engaging. It could be consistent in colors and branding. It can be, it can have lifestyle imagery. It can be seasonalized, right? So suntan lotion during the summer has people at the beach, but during the winter, it's got people on the ski slopes, right? I mean, you can do all kinds of unique things to make it more compelling. But part of this, I would say this is counter to how some people have approached it, even though it's logical. In the same way, we go back to what would I do in media to create a campaign? The marketing team would approach media with, how am I trying to grow? What audience does that mean I need to reach? What behavior do I want to change? Do I want new people to buy for the first time? Current people to buy more? Someone who's bought me before to buy for a new occasion? Is it bringing a lapsed person back? Like, baby come back, right? Like, what is my specific growth objective? And then how would I need to talk to a new person who's never bought the category versus someone who loves me already, and I'm just trying to get them to max out a little bit more? And then again, then what media tactics, capabilities would I use, and how would I measure them, right? That, again, there's whole careers in doing this well, but that's how simply we can put it. Digital shelf should do the same thing. So one of the things that we're going to get to a world where, arguably kind of like in Minority Report, where, Tom Cruise is like being talked to by an ad very differently than the next person that walks by. Like, generative AI is catering to them. And we are getting to a world where, I mean, it's already being tested, right? Where PDPs
we're there already,
right,
for
are
sure.
already kind of curating. But even before that, even before I touch that, with the 10-foot pole, right, is most pages are trying to talk to everybody. And I realize there's a part of wanting to be inclusive, right? Nobody wants to exclude anybody. That's fair. But what if I was very specifically inclusive? Like, hey, Eric, you are exactly the persona I want. Sure, if Chris and his crazy purple jacket wants to shop too, I'll take him, but he's not really who I want. I want you. So I'm not going to be mean to the Chris's of the world, but I'm really going to talk to the Erics of the world. And one really good example of a brand that did this really well, and I mean, they're a challenger brand, so they come at this, but Dude Wipes is a really good example.
Sure.
They actually won one
Fantastic
of our InCaps awards for best in class product detail pages, which is a free program we do just to celebrate and elevate best practices. But it was really funny because we had 11 judges, and half of them are female, the other half are male. And it was funny, a lot of the females were saying, like, they were kind of turned off by the page, right? Like, in some of their comments, like, yeah, it checks all the boxes, but I don't really, again, and sometimes it's a subjective thing, but all the guys are like, this is awesome, right? Now, why? Because obviously, Dude Wipes is a product designed for dudes. Would they turn away dudettes? No, not at all. But they're speaking to dudes, and their humor is potty humor, and it's awesome for dudes that they're trying to reach. And they're growing, and they're killing it, right? Like, in the market. And they're actually creating a category that most dudes didn't know they needed, without getting to TMI, right? Is wiping versus just toilet paper, right? So, or maybe instead of toilet paper, right? So they're doing a really good job, but they're being uber inclusive of one critical audience to the expense of the other audience that they're not really going after. But if they were to create dudette wipes, I bet that would be uber inclusive of that group and not inclusive of us, right, dudes? So,
well, now they're launching little dudes.
hey, but see, sometimes the product, obviously, again, prenatal vitamins. It's only for moms planning to be moms, right? Soon to be moms. A guy isn't going to take prenatal vitamins, but the content can complement that. It doesn't have to just be that the product is only for this type of person, right? It could be that the content says, hey, generally persona X, this is for you, right? And so there was some cool, like, Stoke ice, like brewed iced coffee, had this really cool piece of content on their page. And I don't even drink coffee, but it called to me. It was like, because it was like, people who like cold brewed coffee in cold weather are our kind of people, and we're all for you. Or, like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, but that's a very different kind of person, right? Than I want the hot coffee. So they owned that. I'm not going to have 100% of the audience. I'm going to have this person, and I'm okay with that. And I'm going to own that person. And then, yes, they say all the normal compelling claims and benefits and reasons to believe and stuff, but it's owning a specific audience, obviously speaking to the things they care about in the content. And it's also then bringing social content in, validating it, not just the reviews, but bringing influencer content into videos, right? I know you all are very familiar with the value of a lot of that too. There's so much that can be done, obviously, to ensure that I'm ready for the right device that I'm on. I'm ready for the right persona. I'm ready for the right social validation needed for that audience. I'm also, the other piece to this is, I'm designing for incrementality. I mentioned P&G.
Yeah.
Like, every SKU's content drives the specific goal that that SKU is for. One is to bring people in, one is to trade you up, one is to trade you out, right, to other products. And so,
Sure.
so those are just, I mean, we have a whole like methodology for how we score these in the awards that we do. And then when we work with brands, but this is, it's not, it is actually more art than it is science. It's just asking the right question, going, what could I do to make this more compelling? I don't even have to have all the answers, but quickly I'm going to go, hey, I don't have any social content in my content, right? Or, hey, I'm not trading people over to the rest of my portfolio. Or, hey, this anti-aging product is essentially talking to everyone and not the people that might actually want anti-aging product, right? Or, so it's that kind of thing. If Dude Wipes was talking to women and men, I might be a little concerned that they're not owning their audience, right? So they've done really well owning it. So I think there's this isn't to be like uber ambiguous, but like this is where your expertise on the brand or retail side on your category, your products becomes your asset, because you should know it better than anybody and be able to take the basics up a level to what would be most relevant and personalized.
And when you do that relevant personalization, I mean, what you're really doing is you're building that credibility with the shopper, and ultimately you're building trust. And if you have trust from the shopper, then you stand out on the digital shelf, you stand out in their mind, in store. That's how you win. So everything that you just talked about is how you build trust and take over a market, like Dude
And the cool
Wipes.
thing, Eric, just to build on that, is the neat part about the digital shelf, knowing that, again, digital commerce is the number one driver of growth. It influences over half of in-store sales already. It's influencing the merchant teams on what they pick to stay in store or to bring in store. So it's got massive influence. But being compelling to the right audience helps you show up higher in visibility and rank on the digital shelf too. So unlike in-store, if I did a really good job with my packaging or with my media or my marketing, I'm not going to go up to eye level overnight. I'm going to have to wait for the retailer in store to change my placement months from now. But online, if I'm more compelling today, I'm spinning the flywheel. I'm actually bumping up
Yeah,
to the top tomorrow. So it actually is like, it's cool because you can control your own destiny, and you can play to the algorithm while playing to the shopper at the same time.
amazing. Well, that brings us to my favorite, the conclusion questions, the expert corner. So, few final questions. We're going to tap into your unique insights. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. You could say one word answers, you could dive into it, whatever comes to mind first. So, what is a strategy everyone's following, but no one is questioning?
I had a couple ideas, but one that sticks in my head is, so category management. When I say that, most people tune out because it's like, that's not my job. That's a different team. It's
Yeah,
everybody's job. Category management is, how well do I make the shopper experience for my category on my own, let alone with the retailer, but also how do I design for incrementality, right? New people in, lapse people back to all the different ways we can grow on that customer lifetime value equation. Catman as a strategy is something everyone's following, but no one has been really questioning whether we've made that omni-channel or not, right? So because they were tasked with helping take very mature in-store businesses and optimizing for growth where growth was starting to flatten or decline. But they weren't necessarily invited to the e-com table where they actually could really help e-com teams who don't know how to do the incrementality design. They weren't brought to the table to help them, and then the ecom people don't know Catman. So you had to. So when I say no one's questioning, they're starting to question it now. We actually partner with the Category Management Association a lot on training and content, because you got these cornerstone strategy people that like are really probably, I'm patting them on the back, but like one of the most important teams in the company who don't actually know Omni or have a voice at, or a seat at that table. And they need to, because they can actually design everything that we're doing more holistically around incremental types of growth. So that's one that I think we should definitely question, and more question is more change, request and invite people to the table so that they start helping us grow incrementally wherever we're growing, right? In store or online.
absolutely. What's a trend you think will be on the decline or even dead within the next year?
Well, I don't want to say it's not going to die. Because I would have, a lot of people ask us like, so are you saying the store is dead? And I'm like, heck no, it's not dead. There are stores that will die. There are retailers with stores that will die, and there will be retailers who have stores who will close some of the stores that they have, i.e., they're dead. But the store still matters. It just depends on the shopper mission, the category role that they carry, right? Obviously, there's always going to be need for some convenience and fill-in trip stuff. Costco and Sam's Club and BJ's as Club have this treasure hunt model. The TJ Maxx's and Marshalls and Home Goods of the world have very much a discovery. I know they have categories, but I don't know what they have today. They're obviously going to be electronics and apparel and health and beauty and fresh and other categories that are going to be more like showroom products. So the store is not going to die, and neither will individual models. But click and collect, I'm getting to the point here, is click and collect is 1 degree away from store model, right? Where the shopper still comes and picks up the product. And I've heard a lot of senior leaders they're like, it's almost like kind of like, ooh, the safe e-commerce. I'm going to rest my laurels and my hat on that. It's going to be a part of every business for a long time. It's going to be a bridge to a very delivery-focused future. So if we're still not designing and optimizing for ship to home, quick commerce, home delivery, potentially new models where like product like Walmart in-home and stuff where they put away your stuff, maybe in the future they just stock your stuff for you, almost like vending machines in your home. If we're not getting prepared for a world where drones and robots and store hailing and all these different types of models are coming, we're going to be in trouble. So when I say click and collect will be a model, but it will continue to decline, even if there's a little bit of I'm going to say it's going to decline ultimately because the shopper is going to follow the path of least resistance. So it may look like it grows a little bit, but it's going to come back down as the delivery bump takes over. So I almost cringe when people say that. It's almost like they're resting on the click and collect model. And you're like, yeah, but that's not really convenient. Like I still don't want to go to the store if I don't have to go. Ultimately, to go to waste my gas and everything too. So I'm kind of in a mode of like, the store isn't going to die, click and collect isn't going to die, but there's going to be some continued decline there. So I know that's not a social trend, but that's one I want to press into people, because otherwise they're going to keep basing on the traditional base of the business and not move.
And that might roll into the next one, but what's one thing in your industry everyone is afraid to admit?
Well, I want to say, I don't know if there's always that, like, there's 2 levels of awareness. There's like your subconscious and your conscious, right? In my conscious, I might not admit it, but in my subconscious, I did.
Yeah.
I really do believe retail media is generally more effective than traditional digital media. I've seen so many studies across so many brands, whereas sometimes the brand only has done 1 study. So they're like, oh, but that's just a one-off. And I'm like, but I've seen it like 30 times in the last month across all these companies. But retail media, typically, if I'm buying it from Walmart Connect or Target Roundel or Kroger Precision Marketing or Amazon Ads or whatever, it can cost more than buying the media directly from Meta, right? Or from Google or whatnot. But a lot of times I'm paying the retailer to buy the media from Meta or Google to reach their shoppers, our shoppers together over wherever they actually are. So I'm paying more out up front, but I'm getting a more qualified audience to personalize to, and I'm getting a higher ROI back. So that isn't to say 100% of my media spend should be with retailers, but it is funny when you talk to people, they're like, well, it's almost like if you get them in a quiet corner, they're like, yeah, this has been performing better for all of my objectives, awareness, all the full funnel. But I don't want to admit it to everyone, because then it'll look like I've given up on my traditional media champion, position. So I always say test and learn, always know in what cases is this media better my way versus the retailer way. But I really do think retail media is performing better across the funnel, and will only get better because retailers are getting better capabilities and ways to target and measure.
The metrics don't lie. So
exactly.
What's the most controversial opinion that you hold?
As you led off with my intro, I never thought singing was going to be a career, but I always joke that like if e-commerce didn't pay off, then I could fall back on my singing career or whatever. But I wasn't really that good. But my point is, I really have a lot of fun rewriting songs, like famous songs with e-commerce lyrics to teach, because then it catches your attention. You listen to it and suddenly you're like, oh, that's really catchy. That's silly. And Chris can self-deprecate and I can have fun laughing at them. But at the same time, I just listened to a message that I wasn't listening to before.
Right.
That aside, as a format through sharing controversial opinions, I really do think, I know we've kind of circled around a lot on this, but it's kind of twofold. It's if I change what I measure you on, everything else will change. It's that simple. If I've used this example too. If I told you, Eric, the only way you go to your next afterlife, wherever you believe you go next, if you care where you go after this life, is for you to become a plumber, right? And you'd be like, okay, let's just say you took me at that face value. You'd say, well, Chris, I'm not a plumber. I don't even know where to start, right? I know how to use the toilet. I don't know how to fix the toilet or install a toilet. Well, then what would you do? You'd start watching YouTube videos. You'd probably
Yep.
go to a Home Depot workshop. You'd learn that you have to get a master plumber apprenticeship for several years to earn the right to be a master plumber. So you'd find someone, you'd find a program, you get in, you'd figure out you'd probably break one of your bathrooms trying to figure out how it works so you could put it back together. I mean, magic would start happening because you'd have to make it happen. And so I don't want to say it's not overly controversial, but nobody wants to. There's that saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to
Right.
change metrics because it's hard. And but do it and you'll go to heaven. It's going to be amazing. And you can go to heaven before you actually go to the actual heaven, right? You'll go to heaven in this real world with the sales growth you really want if you do
Yeah.
that. So that's a really big part of it I'm hammering that not just to do full circle, but that's everybody's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they don't do it. And you're like, but if you did that, everything would happen. I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of them. But honestly, I don't need the answers. I can just change your metrics. That's the answer I need. What metric should you be measured on? Everything else comes after that.
And I will say for the kids listening, the number one most dependable way to become a millionaire in America today, become a plumber or electrician.
No, honestly, no. I mean, we've been telling our
It's
own
true.
kids, my family's business is a 100-year plus old family business that's a plumbing supply distributor. So while we're not plumbers, all of our customers are plumbers and contractors. So I grew up on that. So I actually can fix a toilet. But
Nice.
that's just another skill just in case e-commerce doesn't pan out. So
Right. Okay. Yeah. In case it's just a fad. Well, Chris, I mean, what a conversation today, and just packed completely with the insights about evolution of retail media, omnichannel marketing. If there were 3 takeaways you wanted everybody to go home with, what are the 3 quick summary takeaways that you would want to share?
So our hypothesis up front, we are what we do what we measure. If we want to do something differently or better, we have to measure differently or better, right? Insert change there, right? So that's one. Sounds very simple, but it's important. Education, I want to say effective education, and the measurement of the education, which we talked to, is probably your secret weapon, right? The best leaders are the best learners. And a lot of the reasons you don't always have the best leaders is you haven't fostered a culture of learning. Everybody says they do, but they're not actually then enabled to, they don't send their people to conferences. They don't hold them accountable to bringing back insights, right? So it's really prioritizing education. And yes, you have to balance it out with their real job. But what if, like Google, where they had 20% time, your 20% time was actually, you still need to be learning something. So it's not just a free day to catch up on work alone. It's actually go work on something cool and different, learn something cool and different. And we're gonna not audit you, but we're gonna measure what you've been doing all year to make sure that you are bringing some of that cool new stuff back in. And the last one, this is a little bit of I want to channel John F. Kennedy, right? But it's like, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Like, ask somebody who is in this position that owns something that you know is a big change. What can I do to help you, right? Like, you don't have to do all of it when they go, oh my gosh, Eric, thank you so much for asking. Here's 20 pages of to do. You don't have to do all of it, but the first step is to find out what could be done, how you can help, and have that individual propensity, right? That intellectual curiosity and again, nobody's assigned it to you. You're just trying to find out how you could be helpful. And you might find quickly that you could be not just helpful, but impactful, right? So I don't mean to say that all of you out there aren't doing that. I don't hear a lot of people come and say, like, Chris, what can I do? Like, I'm in sales. I don't own this and I don't even know where to start. What's it? Oh my gosh, I could give you 2 quick things you could start doing right now, and you'd be helping everybody, right? And that'll lead you to do once you get that down, the next 2 things, right? So ask that question, what can I do not just for my company, right? But what can I do for my shopper, right? Like, if we want to be really altruistic, what can I really do for my shopper? And what does that mean that we can do as a team? And where can I start? Where's my role in this?
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Piano Man, you have certainly sang us a beautiful e-commerce melody jingle song today. Thank you for everything. It's been a pleasure having you on. For our listeners, be sure to check out Firstmovr. Chris, can you tell us where listeners can find you?
Yeah, you can find all of our, you can find us on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Oscar Koszubski, my business partner, our team. We'd love to help you. Firstmovr.com. Remember, there's no E in Firstmovr because there's no E in e-commerce either. But we have free events all the time. There's no catch. We're just always democratizing great knowledge. And Eric, we'd love to have you on at some point too. So thank you for
We would
having me.
love that. Absolutely. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much.